like Graf Spee better than Prince Eugen. That would have been my choice for a German ship, if not her one of her sister ships.
That's true.
That survived longer.
Prince Eugen just gorgeous though. Sorry. Graf Spee, I mean, those ships. Graf Spee looks the best out of those three ships because each one is slightly different.
They are.
Graf Spee, in my opinion, is the best looking out of all of them.
I like the pole mast better than that weird blocky superstructure.
Really?
The blocky superstructure doesn't look good with the just single turrets fore and aft.
You're also the guy who said he likes Omahas. All right, you good?
Yeah.
So clearly there were some taste issues.
So recently, in the news, we heard about the Bronze Eagle and swastika. That's, I think, mostly the problem here of the German Pocket-Battleship Graf Spee. This has been obviously Graf Spee was scuttled after the Battle of River Plate.
Yeah, December of 1939, so right at the beginning of World War II.
We did a short course video on the Battle of River Plate, so the link will be up here. You can click it and refresh yourself if you don't know. Basically, the Graf Spee could have broken back out, but through British deception, the crew and the captain of Graf Spee thought that a massive British force was waiting for him, and thus he scuttled the ship. A lot of German warships had these large cast eagles and swastikas on the stern.
Especially pre-war, and Graf Spee sorties before war is even declared, so that she's on station when it starts. So they don't have time to offload all of these ornaments and
this is very much ornamental.
Yeah.
It's
very Occidental, very European.
Yeah. This thing weighs almost 700 pounds. This is
Oh wow.
Yeah, this is a single piece of cast bronze.
You can replace that with a lot of anti-aircraft guns.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it serves no purpose except looking pretty to your Führer, I guess you could say.
On the backside of your ship as you run away.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Wow, that's a good-looking ship.
And
Look at her go.
So obviously, as the ship is scuttled and sinks, the Eagle goes with it. Bits and pieces are removed off of Graf Spee and sort of moved onto land, like the rangefinder and I think one of the 150 millimeter barrels from its secondary battery. So bits and pieces of Graf Spee are removed off and brought on land, and then a lot of the ship is.
And then this happens, I believe, immediately after wartime, and so the British are looking at they're recovering this so they can look at the technology.
Right. So this made the news again in June because a number of years ago, a salvage team went to the wreck and pulled the Bronze Eagle off the stern and brought it up. This was seized by Uruguay, and because it's and then they have essentially kept it in storage for ever since then. And
I was a little confused by this because depending on what article you read, the Uruguayan government may have been involved in the recovery, or at least allowed it, but it seems to be debated.
So therein lies the problem, and Uruguay is not necessarily known as a nation with a lot of good maritime museums, and it's not like they have got a bunch of museum ships down there. So the question is what to do with it, and the reason why it made news in June is because they decided they were going to melt it down and recast the bronze into a Dove Peace Memorial to stick down there in that sort of park that the other bits are in.
And they had moved so far along in this planning process that they had an artist picked out, and presumably that individual had a design or was working on a design. He was able to tell them that it will be something related to Peace Dove, and that may indicate that there were drawings or other things that had been presented.
And this just set the whole community on fire. There was a huge pushback against it, and we're not talking pushback like a bunch of neo-Nazis went out and protested outside some government building in Uruguay, but real people of studiers of naval history, even myself. I thought this is incredibly wrong. I mean, you are under the opinion that it should never have been brought up to begin with.
Yeah, the thing that upsets me the most about this whole process is that part of the ship was removed from the rest of its context. To historians, curators like myself, archaeologists even more so than me, the context of an artifact is even more important. So removing this piece of the ship is an issue. And I have big problems with that. Obviously, scrappers in Asia ripping up these ships, I think that most people would agree that that's a problem. But many, even things like removing the bells from shipwrecks, or going the other direction, leaving plaques or other evidence at a wreck site, getting your submarine imploded over the Titanic and contaminating that archaeological site.
That's a whole other thing. Now, the one thing you can now you talk about removing that eagle from its context. So unlike a traditional German eagle that's sitting on top of the swastika that would hang outside the Reichschancellery or something like that, which it's flat,
right.
It goes up against the side of a building. This eagle, and on these German ships, contour both with the wings and then down with the feet and the swastika to the stern of the ship. So when you pull it off, it's bent in because it's supposed to be, it's mounted to the stern of the ship. And so then there's that point, you're now removing it from its context. Now it looks like you could have pulled this out of Berlin, but it's all bent. Why is it bent? So the wreck itself is also not a grave site.
That is a key thing here that further complicates it. If it was a war grave of any kind, 100% dead set against it. You shouldn't be touching it at all.
Now, obviously, the ship did participate in the battle, and it suffered casualties. Those men were removed when the ship went into port temporarily down there seeking refuge, and then ultimately it couldn't stay there under because Uruguay's neutral, so it had to go back out, and then they immediately scuttled it, and then everyone gets off, obviously. So it's not a war grave like Prince of Wales, being full of Royal Navy sailors and then being salvaged. That's just that's I can't.
That's deeply upsetting, no matter how you look at it.
And then did you see the pictures?
I'm not sure. I have seen the ones you're referencing.
They I forget which government raided one of the yards that was involved in the scrapping, and then they took pictures, and there's bits of
human remains.
No, not human remains, but bits of the ship, identifiable parts of that.
Oh, that. So ship remains. That's almost as upsetting. I like ships a lot more than I like people.
Yeah. So I think that in this case, the salvage of the Eagle is probably okay. In my opinion, bringing it up was okay in that it's not a war grave. I do think, though, that being a very sort of ornate piece of that ship and something that really defines that ship, because obviously bits and pieces, it got in the explosion and got all mangled and then caught on fire, and then they cut it all up anyway. So if there's one piece of Graf Spee, maybe aside from the crest that goes on the bow, which I believe that was all cut up, that eagle still is probably the piece that would define it the most. To me, Uruguay should just donate it to the Imperial War Museum. And that should be the end of this conversation. It should go to the Imperial War Museum. They were ultimately responsible, they being the Royal Navy and British, were ultimately responsible for that ship being scuttled and the reason why this is even a thing. And it should go on display there. And that should be the end of this conversation. The fact that we're like it's being, Indiana Jonesed and it's in a box and like stuffed away in some Uruguay warehouse is ridiculous.
Yeah, so I guess the one thing that would make it acceptable to remove this from its context, that there are two possible things, and I don't know the motivations of the scrappers, unfortunately. I've never read any articles that were able to conclusively say they were doing this for X reason.
The salvaging of World War II ships is generally because of this pre-nuclear steel.
Right. No, I'm sorry. I don't mean the scrappers. The divers who go and recover this.
Oh, right.
Because Graf Spee, as far as I know, is not in danger of that to the same extent that the ships over in Southeast Asia are. One, if the greater artifact itself is in danger. If it's just corroded to the point that's going to collapse, or if it's in the middle of a shipping channel, they got to blow it, or something like that. Okay, save parts of that ship so that we still have it. And two, the other possible, that one isn't a war grave, but if you are going down there explicitly to put in a museum and preserve it, there is an argument to be made. I'm not sure if it's otherwise not threatened, if I would agree with it, but there's at least an argument to be made. But it seems to me like it was being salvaged to sell.
So I think it's a little bit of both. Ultimately, at the end of the day, like any salvager understands, the laws. Everyone has Google. You can figure out what, you'd have to bring that up and essentially sell it on some sort of black market. You could not sell a piece of Nazi memorabilia that large without it ending up in the news, and without attracting political attention from countries like Germany.
And I have read some articles that seem to imply that the Uruguayan country and the salvagers worked together to do this. We're going to sell it, and then we're going to split the proceeds, which I guess makes it better because it is being sold in an accessible public forum, but is still rating this artifact.
So at the end of the day, bringing it up and selling it just for the sake of that, to me, there's not a whole lot there. I understand that here you have this, at the end of the war, all this sort of a lot of Nazi memorabilia was just broken up and scrapped, so, part of the denazification of Germany and everything else. So here you have a very unique piece of Kriegsmarine naval history in the form of this bronze eagle. As you said, Graf Spee was at sea as the war kicks off. Otherwise that would have been taken off, put in a box, never put back on, found at the end of the war, and broken up then.
Scrap, yeah.
So here you have this really unique thing that only exists because of this ship's particular story. And so you might say, well, instead of it sitting just down there casually, we can go get it relatively easily. But that's where I think, okay, just the idea that we're going to sell this and that's going to be it. But I think that's when it needs to go in a museum. And that way you can just say, you know what, like the real piece of history here, the artifact, most of the ship has been, gone and cut up and everything else. This is the only real thing here that's of any actual sort of significance. Let's bring it up so that people can see it and view it and understand, but to just keep it in a box for 10, 15 years and then melt it down, I think that's at that point, just leave it down there. Like if you're if you're that bothered by it, then you should have left it underwater. But for them to bring it up and then to make the decision that we're going to melt it down, like go back outside into the water and throw it overboard and return it to the ship, because at that point I don't see a purpose.
Yeah, and I believe I remember reading an article from a couple of years ago where they did state that their intention was to sell it after recovering it, and I can't for the life of me remember the gentleman's name at this point, but a prominent Jewish businessman offered to buy it explicitly to destroy it because he did not want a neo-Nazi or something like that to buy it and use it as Nazi iconology or put it in their Nazi shrine.
Well, so you have to think about the type of. I mean, so something like that size with that history, that would be worth millions of dollars. And so there's only a few people. So something like that, if a person came forward and bought that, it would obviously end up in a private collection. That private collection then being essentially sealed off from the rest of the world. So
I can't imagine any museums coming up with the money to
exactly
one, purchase it, but then ship it to wherever they are, mount it on a really unique 3D mounting object.
Exactly.
They'd have to practically build a whole structure in their museum to accommodate this.
So that's the thing. So in my opinion, if it were to be sold, regardless if the ideology of the person who had the money to pay for it, it would end up hidden away in some private collection anyway. And so is it really bother? It's not like they're going to mount it on the hood of, a Mercedes and go drive it through Berlin in some parade. It weighs 700 pounds. So it's hard to say, like what really is the right or wrong answer here. Again, I still just believe that if of course, the Uruguayan government president, he's the one who ultimately came out and said, no, we're not doing that. He came out and said that he stopped that. We're not doing that. We're going to figure this out. Until then, we're going to continue to hold on to it. And you know what? To save face, because no matter what you do, you're wrong. Like
at this point,
At this point, you're wrong in the eyes of somebody. So again, in my personal opinion, the best thing that he can do is donate it to the Imperial War Museum, and then let them figure out, because it's not like the Imperial War Museum is not already full of Nazi artifacts, and everything else. And then let them either display it, or let them figure it out.
Here's a question for you. You are the curator of the Imperial War Museum, and somebody offers it, whether it's the president of Uruguay says, look, this has been a huge egg on our face for us. Like, we just want to get rid of it. It's yours now. Or whether it's a billionaire buys it and then it's like, I am going to bequeath this to the wing of your museum that I'm going to pay to build. Would you accept this object?
In my opinion, why not? The museum's already full of all this other stuff. This is just another artifact, that better tells the story of the Royal Navy in World War II, in whatever section of the museum, that occupies, and why not? Like, why would someone? So as the resident curator, let's ask you that question. If someone showed up with hypothetically a piece of Washington, some part of Washington was, when it was being cut up, was saved for some reason by somebody, and it's been sitting in a box for 60 years, and someone, obviously it doesn't carry the same weight in this case, maybe physically maybe it's a gun barrel or something, and something doesn't carry sort of the ideology that a gigantic bronze swastika would, but
which is a whole nother.
But would you, as a battleship curator, not immediately say, okay, we'll take this and we'll figure it out? But isn't that the point? Like, the answer is immediately yes, and then we'll figure it out, versus like, I'll think about it, we'll have to come back to you.
Actually, my answer is a little bit more complicated than that.
Okay.
There's no such thing as a yes or no answer with me, and I apologize to you and the internet in its whole for that. It is not a unilateral decision on my part. There is another curator at the museum. We talk together very closely, and for objects that don't, like, boom, this fulfills our mission statement and our collection management plan, which is the multi-page document that tells us what we can collect and what we can't. If it is from Battleship New Jersey, I'm like, okay, yeah, even if we've got 10 of these, it's from the ship, it's got a sailor associated with it, no questions asked, we make that decision. If it's not fitting into that, then we have to go to the curatorial committee of the board, which is includes ourselves. It includes some content experts who are not on the board, and it includes some board members from both legal backgrounds and history backgrounds. So a great group of people who I work with, and together we make the decision on the artifact. And we have had artifacts for other, even American battleships, offered to the museum before, and we've made the decision that we can't take it for whatever reason. Either because we didn't think that we could use it. Like, for example, I've had silver from the Battleship New Jersey, Battleship Nevada offered to the museum, and we thought about it long and hard, and we're like, we can't really think of a way that we would use this. And in that case, the silver might have been part of the state silver set. So it might have technically belonged to either Secretary of the Navy or the state of Nevada. And so we were like, well, we don't want to get involved with it. That said, with objects like that we don't accept, we do try to work with the donee to be like, okay, this will not fit with our collection, but I can put you in touch with these other museums or entities that you might be able to work with to find a permanent home for this. Because, yeah, at the end of the day, we don't want the object to be lost, stolen, destroyed, or even in a private collection. It is better to be publicly accessible somewhere.
And again, I think that's my point about maybe donating it to the Imperial War Museum. I mean, here's a museum that is so big and has so much already. So you think, okay, this is a large object, but if anyone can absorb it, it should be them. But then also from what you just said, if it just means keeping it out of like a neo-Nazi collector's hands, or keeping it out of a box in a warehouse in South America, just being, since you went to the trouble of bringing it up from underwater,
the unnecessary trouble. Nobody asked you to do this.
No one asked you to do it, but you did. So now what?
Now we have to live with the consequences.
Yeah. And to me, again, as a curator in that museum, I might think, like Graf Spee did a lot of damage to those British cruisers that it was fighting. And so
I think she sank 19 merchant ships prior to even engaging Ajax, Exeter, and Achilles.
even before that, which is why they went down there to get it, because it's like you got to do something about this ship. And so even to the British sailors and everyone who may have lost their lives to that ship, here's this almost like this trophy, like, oh, we got it, but that really helps tell the story today. And I just can't imagine a curator, especially again at that museum, who they already deal with artifacts like that and have space and a much larger staff than a museum ship.
As the curator of the Battleship New Jersey, if somebody was to offer this to me for whatever reason,
where would you put it?
Again, this is not my decision alone, but my recommendation to the curatorial committee would be that we, Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial, does not accept this artifact. There is certainly a lot to be said about the iconography involved, and I'm not sure if I can say it as eloquently as other people. I'm not of Jewish descent. My people were living in America already, even though Poland was occupied by the Nazis. My people were already here, so the swastika is not as hurtful of an icon to me as to many other people out there. But even beyond that, it doesn't help us fulfill our mission. We'll have to spend money to preserve it if we keep it in a box in our collection, or if we find some way to transport it, mount it, display it. Even though there is a great historical story to be told here, we are spending money that could have been spent towards the preservation of our ship, which is our actual mission, as opposed to the preservation of this object, which in no way falls within our mission.
And again, I think that's the idea of why it probably fits the best with the Imperial War Museum. It's like it's in their mission, and as the business person, my thought is, whatever, for better or worse, you're getting people through your door to view that artifact.
Oh, do you really want to get those sorts of people through your door? Like,
the thing is, at the end of the day, whatever your ideology is, if you're not pitching a tent outside and, like, whatever, I don't know. But it's like, it's, I'm sure it already happens. That's the thing. Like, we let's not sit here and pretend like this would be a new thing. Like, I'm sure there are plenty of visitors who visit museums both in Germany and in the UK to see Nazi artifacts for maybe non-traditional historical reasons. So
not just because those are the bad guys that Grandpa beat up on.
Yeah. So, but again, it's better than, because if they pay to get in, their money works in the same way to preserve the other artifacts. It doesn't do anyone any good to leave it sealed in a box in a warehouse in Uruguay.
I suspect there is a way to tell the story of this artifact in a way that is acceptable to most people.
That doesn't involve melting it down.
Yeah, it's an artifact. It shouldn't be destroyed. If I knew that it was going to be given to a neo-Nazi or Nazi organization or something like that, I might argue that it's better to destroy it than to give it to them. But that is something that everybody is aware of. The conversation, the dialogue has been happening for about a decade now, since this was raised. So that's unlikely to happen. This particular artifact should not be destroyed.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, let us know what you think. Are you in favor of salvaging artifacts off of sunken vessels? Is this artifact worth saving, regardless of what it is? Should it have been raised in the first place? Just let us know in the comments below. And as always, like, comment, subscribe if you like what you see. Ryan and I do this about once a month. Anything more, Ryan? He's good.
If you're a Nazi, you don't have to come out to my museum.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. Oh my God, the comments. They're like, Ryan's an anti-Nazi. He doesn't want.
Oh no!
But that's the internet, though. Like, that's the internet. Come on, like.
That is the greatest insult I've ever been given.